Okay, and good morning again, everybody. So today we are dealing with chapter 7 of the book God's Voice Within. And if you have it handy, you can look at it, but you probably don't need to. We've been working our way through this book. This is we're getting toward the back of it now. There's just two chapters to go, 8 and 9, and nine's just a little bit of a summary. So this is really about the process of discerning. We've had lots of discussions about the whole thing, and I just want to make the point that, and this is personal, so you may or may not relate to this, but um, I believe the book Alcoholics Anonymous says that your real problem is lack of power. And what you lack power over is you and your reactions to the life that you're in. And it even goes so far as to say that the reason we experience fear is because our self-reliance fails us, but because we don't have a working relationship with God, we have no place else to go to guide our lives except our pretty much intellectual self-reliance. And then it winds up developing habit patterns, and before you know it, um, as a human being, we're operating on our own thought system, and if there's any trouble or addictive behavior in there, before you know it, we're powerless over it. And the book is saying lack of power over your reactions to your life is your problem, and our solution is that you are going to try to develop this relationship with a power greater than your body and your mind. We're calling it spiritual power. You can call it soul. You can call it God. You can call it whatever. We're not picky on that. And then you're going to try to develop this relationship, which we primarily do through prayer and meditation. For me, the high point of the steps is step 11, where I am to pray only. It's a key word, only for knowledge of God's will for me. Now, you can change that to God's purpose for my life. And backing up again, it's going to say, um, sought through prayer and meditation to improve. Now, we use the word conscious contact, but for me, a more to improve my relationship with God, because relationships are the thing that's the first of the bedevilments, trouble with personal relationships. And part of the problem is that a lot of us react with resentment or fear or remorse, so that we're not able to effectively be in a relationship. And here we're asking to have a relationship with God. So praying only for knowledge of God's will for me, you could say in this lingo, God's purpose for my life. um, I have said over and over again, I know Jack's purpose for my life, for what Jack thinks is Jack's life. And that's live as long as I can in safety, feel as good as I can, use the world to make myself feel good, and then mentally I'm going to justify self preservation, self gratification, self justification. That's what Jack wants. And then Ignatius comes along and says, "Well, that doesn't matter. What matters is that you trust, love, and serve your Creator. That's going to save your soul." And we've said before, he says, "Save your soul." We're saying, do the work your soul came here to do. Um, I have, for a long time, I've talked about the book Journey of Souls, that talks about the stuff that happens to the soul in between its incarnations. And I've got another book that Christine and I have talked about. It's Your Soul's Plan, or no, this is the second one. It's called Your Soul's Gift. And it's just amazing the way he talks about the experience that people have, where you come into this incarnation with a learning agenda. There's something your soul is trying to learn through its human experience. And we ask questions like, what is the exact nature of your wrongs? I don't know I'm not sure. As far as I can get most often is, I believe that this thing has got good information for me, that this thing can figure it out. Um, if you say, well, what is the learning purpose of your soul? Why has your soul incarnated this time? Um, I don't know, but I'm convinced that where I'm having trouble with life in general, whether it's relationships, money, physical health, whatever, where I'm having trouble is where I'm going to learn my lessons. That's a hard thing to say, because we want to feel, the better I feel, the better I'm doing, the better my life is. And then Ignatius comes along and says, you got it backward. If you will trust, love, and serve your creator, um, when you're getting into that stuff, you're going to feel faith and hope and love. And when you're following the ego's wishes, you're going to feel doubt and fear and despair. And I've told you about my experiences with despair, a brutal depression that I went through. It's not a uncommon thing for people in AA, and I'm today with it. This was 2019, so I'm uh, 6 years later, 7 years later, and I'm still working on understanding it. I don't feel like I'm going back. It's just like alcoholism. I don't feel like I'm going back if I'll keep doing what I'm doing. But it was a very challenging experience, and I feel I learned more about my ego's stuff than I did before. And Bill Wilson himself, is just a remarkable statement. He had a depression that lasted 11 years, right in the middle, in the early part of our life, and he did all kinds of stuff, but he had a very, very hard time doing it. And he said, um, that he attributed that to his failure to work the steps in all aspects of his life. And he, there are certain areas that he just was not working the steps for sure. And then he goes on to say, in the long run, this is remarkable. In the long run, everything evolves for the better, not because of pleasure, but because of pain. It's the difficulties that make us, and I'm sure I've said several times, it was this depression that was my deepest experience of powerlessness over me. I saw powerless over alcohol. That's easy. And powerless over certain other things. But I did not really see powerlessness over my human personality till I'm feeling as bad as I felt all my life, for as long as I've ever felt all my life. And thanks to you people, my sponsor, the meetings, the literature, I got desperate enough to ask God to restore me to sanity, which is way back in step two. And I feel I have been restored to sanity, and that gets me to the beginning of real AA work, which in my mind is 10, 11, and 12 all the time. 10 incorporates steps 4 through 9. In the 10th step protocol, pray at once for removal, share with somebody, make amends if called for, turn your mind to service. And then gives us this wonderful question, God, how can I best serve you to guide us and how we're gonna be of service to our creator. So any rate, when you get to the Jesuit system and talking about desolation and consolation, and we read it this morning, the key line is it's like, the fear page 68 in the middle, just to the extent that I'm humbly relying on God, and just to the extent I'm living the way God wants me to live, I will be enabled, I will get the power to meet the calamity. The calamity does not stop. And whether it's a personal calamity inside my mind or a physical action calamity out there. It doesn't say the calamity is anything where I'm not feeling trust, love, and serving God. So just to the extent that I humbly rely, and just to the extent that I behave the way I think God wants me to behave, I will get the power to meet the calamity with serenity. Now, what's serenity? Well, it's different for all of us. For me, it's I don't need anything to be different. I don't need the weather, a person, the situation I'm in. I don't need it to be different. But it's also, for me, faith and hope and love, which Ignatius is saying you will experience faith and hope and love when you are in sync with God's purpose for your life. So how the frig am I going to figure out God's purpose for my life? Well, that's where these rules for discernment really kick in. Chapter 6 was about we went through these. Oh yeah, chapter 6 he called that establishing the foundation, and in chapter 6 where it's just like do you remember in the workshops or in that there's this pamphlet called How to Listen to God, and the first thing How to Listen to God says, well, it establishes some spiritual truths, and then it says you got to establish the conditions if you want to have a relationship with God. I've got it here somewhere. These are the conditions: be quiet and still, listen, be honest, test the thoughts that come, and then finally act on the guidance. Those are the conditions. That's exactly what we're talking about, exactly what steps 10, 11, and 12 are talking about, exactly what this Ignatian stuff is talking about. So in chapter 6, we talked about um, first establishing what you're seeking, what are you trying to discern. And I'm saying in the end, I'm trying to discern God's purpose for my life. They say establish a grateful heart. This is important, and we do that with their take and receive prayer, which is as close to our third step prayer as anything I've found so far. They have a concept in chapter 6 of it's magis, I think is the way you say it, which is our equivalent of God, how can I best serve you? And then he talks about two things: indifference of desire, indifference of the heart's desires, and indifference of the will. So that's exactly what our book talks about when it says this is about you're in step 10 again. Your next job is to grow in understanding and effectiveness. Understanding is here, understanding is faith, and effectiveness is work, because our big thing is understanding without effective behavior doesn't mean diddly. That we're after both of those things. So indifference of the heart is in that I'm not trying to tell God what I need in my life. And indifference of the will is that I'm not trying to predetermine how I'm gonna serve God. So with that, we get to this chapter 7. Chapter 7 has basically 6 different things. It has 4 phases. Get quiet is the first phase. Gather data, the second phase. Dream the dreams, tapping into deep desires. That's the third phase. Ponder the dreams, weighing desolations and consolation. That's the fourth phase. And then it does these 2 additions to the chapter. One is when you're stuck. It gives you a bunch of when you feel stuck. And I would say in AA, that was a feeling that I encountered so often, that in other people as well as myself, I feel stuck. I feel like I'm spinning my wheels. I'm in a rut or whatever it is. And there are definite things we can do when we're feeling stuck to get out of that. And then the second is the opposite. It's some information about what the Jesuits call consolation without previous cause. And we call it a God shot. It's where I experience the truth and the reality of higher power being active in my life, and I can't explain it based on my previous experience. I haven't done something to allow to make that happen. I'm simply experiencing the power and majesty of God. You know, my mind often goes to, his name was Fitzmayo. It's right at the end of We Agnostics. I'm pretty sure it's page 56. And this guy has a like a psychic break, and he hears a voice that says, "Who are you to say there is no God?" Because he's been resting in his agnosticism, even though he was brought up in a religious household and all of that stuff. And then it goes on to say he fell to his knees. He stood in the presence of infinite power and love. I fell to his knees, and I don't know which it was, but he's experiencing the presence of infinite power and love for the first time. He lived in conscious companionship with his creator. I've talked often in here about 3 different levels of miracles. The first level is in the 10-step promises. We realize that we're not thinking about drinking, and we didn't do that. Something else took away our obsession for the relief that we get from alcohol. We're not thinking that. That is the miracle of it. It just comes. Second level is pretty sure page 51, right before the bedevilments. Our consciousness of the our relationship with God is the most important fact of our lives. I can say that I would not have said that probably 3 years ago, but it's for me the most important fact of my life. There's a third level. And the third level, it's in the 5th step promises, we will feel as though we are on the broad highway, walking hand in hand with the spirit of the universe. And spirit of the universe is capitalized, and that means God. That means higher power. I'm walking hand in hand on the broad highway. That's what I want. That's a another. That's when I'm where my soul and my soul's purpose for being here and my creator's purpose for my life, they are all integrated, and I'm walking hand in hand with the spirit of the universe. So this chapter 7 is trying to get us to discern God's purpose for our lives so we can walk hand in hand with the spirit of the universe. So it was get quiet, gather the data, tapping into your deep desires, weighing your reaction to this stuff as you go through this, and then finally these two cases: one when we're feeling stuck, and another when we're experiencing God beyond our ability to intellectually doubt. That's just a wonderful way to describe that. All right. So, and one thing that he does that I noticed in getting ready for this, he starts each phase with a quote from Ignatius's biography, and I hope you don't mind that I'm doing this. And his language is so stilted, and he writes his autobiography in the third person. It's like he doesn't say I or me. He talks about he, whatever, the pilgrim, the whatever, and then it's very well. Here you go. So this is the quote from phase 1. This is on page 153 of God's Voice Within. But our Lord restored his health, and he grew better. He was healthy in every respect, except he could not readily stand on that leg, and he was thus forced to remain in bed. So, if you remember from the story, he gets hit by a cannonball in a battle, and now he's laying in the family castle, Loyola Castle, and he's got nothing to do because he can't do much. So, um, so the author of the book, Mark Thibodeau, is called. This is the opening quote for phase 1. Get quiet. So Ignatius is quiet because he's got a bum leg and he can't move around. So here's gather the data. Phase 2. Since Ignatius was an avid reader of books of worldly fiction, commonly called chivalrous romances, and since he was feeling quite well, he asked for some such books to pass the time. In that house, however, they found none of the type he was used to reading, and so they brought him the Life of Christ and a book on the lives of the saints in Spanish. By frequent reading of these books, he grew somewhat fond of what he found written therein. So you can just imagine, here's this knight in shining armor, bum leg. He wants to watch soap operas on TV, um, and all they got is the life of Jesus and the lives of the saints. And so he starts reading them. So this is what Mark Thibodeau is calling gather the data. Then you get to dream the dreams, tapping into deep desires. So while reading the life of our Lord and those of the saints, he used to pause and meditate, reasoning with himself, what if I were to do what St. Francis did or do what St. Dominic did? Thus, in his thoughts, he dwelt on many good deeds, always suggesting to himself great and difficult ones. Throughout these thoughts, he used to say to himself, St. Dominic did this, so I have to do it too. St. Francis did this, so I have to do it too. These thoughts lasted a long time. So remember, we got um, get quiet, gather the data, dream the dreams, tapping into deep desires, and then finally ponder the dreams, weighing desolations and consolations. So this is the real kicker. This is where Ignatius senses that when he thinks spiritual thoughts and about spiritual deeds, he feels good and it lasts. But when he thinks about the chivalrous romance novels and all the stuff, he was a womanizer, he loved to drink, he loved to fight. When he thinks about all that stuff, he feels good briefly, but it doesn't last. This is the first time he's starting to he's going through a religious conversion for one thing, but he's starting to sense that how he feels are the results of what he does rather than a goal. So if my goals are self-preservation, self-gratification, self-justification, and that's what I want, that's not the way this works. The reverse is true. If I live to God's purpose for my life, I will feel faith and hope and love. And this has been a big deal for me because as soon as I'm feeling off, I can I can then go to, well, I run through, first things first. Am I having a problem with first things first? I'm feeling overwhelmed. I can't decide what to do first. Am I having a problem with life on life's terms? Is there something about the life that's coming at me that I am unwilling to accept the terms of how it's presenting itself? Is it a live and let live problem? Am I having trouble because I want somebody else to live differently than they do, and I'm kind of ignoring my job to live my life? Or is it finally a let go and let God problem, which is always, I mean, that's the hardest one. First things first, I'm pretty good at that. Life on life's terms, I'm pretty good on that. Live and let live, I'm still working on that. But letting go and letting God, that's a tough that's a tough task for this alcoholic. Anyway, okay, so now he's gotten quiet. He's reading the life of Christ and the life of the saints. He's thinking about it, and now he's pondering the dreams, weighing desolations and consolations. There was this difference, however. When he thought of worldly matters, he found much delight, but after growing weary and dismissing them, he found that he was dry and unhappy. But when he thought of imitating the saints in all the austerities they practiced, he not only found consolation in these thoughts, but even after they left him, he remained happy and joyful. He did not consider, nor did he stop to examine this difference until one day his eyes were partially opened and he began to wonder at this difference and to reflect upon it. From experience, he knew that some thoughts left him sad while others made him happy, and little by little he came to perceive the different spirits that were moving him, one coming from the devil and the other coming from God. So thanks to my sponsor uh, teaching me the power of word substitution, and thanks to applying that to a number of things, the book makes the point over and over again. Um, you got to have your own conception of God. This will not work if you're trying to make somebody else's conception of God come into your life. It's got to be what makes sense to you. I have to get rid of the devil. Um, for me, the devil is my selfish, self-centered human thinking. The part of me that thinks somehow I'm separate from you and from the rest of the world. The part of me that thinks I've got to build up what I feel I need in my life and stay away from the stuff that bothers me. It's all my human ego personality, which I identify with my body and my mind. And when he says one coming from the devil, that's coming from me, from my selfish, self-centered human body, mind, and human personality. The other coming from the God, for me, that's coming from my soul. That's a deeper part of me that has lived before and will live again. And that's the part that I'm trying to bring more and more into my life through prayer and meditation as we go along. So now I'm going to go back to phase one, the get quiet, and phase two, and talk about them again. And so I'm back on phase one, get quiet's page 153, and just going to touch on some of his headings here. Um, I need a consistent and meaningful prayer life. So I can tell you without question, the longer I'm in AA trying to do what we do, I understand that prayer and meditation is the single most important ingredient. We read this morning, head in the clouds, feet on the ground. Prayer is where I'm getting my head in the clouds. If I don't get my feet on the ground, um, it's faith without works, and that doesn't mean anything. But my head in the clouds, that's what prayer and meditation are about for me. And he's saying I need a consistent and meaningful prayer life. We've talked about Jesuit, the steps of prayer. They do things like they want you to have a normal beginning and a normal ending that you do all the time. It's just like us saying the serenity prayer in meetings. You can feel the room change as soon as we all say the serenity prayer together. The meeting moves to a different, it's Pavlovian. We've done it so often. It's just something that happens as a result of a meaningful positive habit. We can't just pray when we're in trouble, or pray, but the step 11 is saying, well, you pray before you're going to bed. You're settling down the day. You're asking for corrective measures. You're praying first thing when you get up. So we got two that they're asking us to do every day. And then you're going to pray. And as you go through the day, anytime you're feeling agitated or doubtful, you're going to pray again. That's another time. So at any rate, we need a consistent and meaningful prayer life. Um, and he defines prayer life. I thought this was interesting. It's on page 154. Prayer life: through prayer, my ongoing intimate relationship with God. So at this point, even though I know theoretically it is an intimate relationship, there's no question. but I am so much more stuck in my awareness of myself as a separate body mind. Um, Even though I know I have this intimate relationship, I don't feel it. But I do. One of the things that uh, he talks about is that when God is acting on you, it is like water dropping on a sponge. And when it's the ego acting on you, it's like water crashing on a stone. Uh, and we've talked about it before. I go to Jim the car salesman. Suddenly the thought crossed my mind: put whiskey in the milk. It's going to be all right. I vaguely sensed I wasn't being any too smart. That's the the guidance of the spirit comes gently. It's not when things are working. That part, I think we talked about it before. It reverses. It's in the rules for discernment, that if you're going away from God, God will call it pricks of conscience. You will feel a sharp kind of sting when you're going away from God, where the ego is seductive in the way that it. So, any rate, prayer life through prayer, my ongoing intimate relationship with God. All that matters is that a person pray a little every day in order to grow closer to God, who very dearly desires to grow closer to that person. This is a Jesuit theme, and it shows up in A Course in Miracles. It shows up a lot of different places where people will say, "You have no idea how much God loves you right here, right now, and wants to connect with you." You're saying, "I want to connect with God. Where are you?" And God is trying to connect with you every bit as much. What matters is that I am reaching out to God. Prayer is the essential link between God's guidance and our action. Then he does a couple of prayer logistics in this phase one of getting quiet. I don't need to pray for long stretches of time every day, but I need to pray a little every day. What am I doing during my prayer time? Well, I'm checking to see what's hanging on my mind. I'm doing a formulaic prayer. I spend a few moments getting myself quiet and receptive toward God. We talked about, it was some time ago, but were these steps of Jesuit prayer, and 1 through 4 are: begin in your usual way, quiet down before the Lord, behold the Lord beholding you with much love. This is not where I'm loving on God. This is where I'm trying to experience God loving me. And then number 4 is: tell the Lord a few things that you're grateful for. A few things, not a endless gratitude list. A few things, large and small, that you are grateful for right now. And then you go into the process, whatever you're going to do. And at the end, one of the things you do at the end before you end in your usual way is resolve. You're resolving, I'm going to take this from the prayer and try to bring it into my life over here in this way. Okay. He talks about using an object if that helps you. And then number 5, as best I can, I now let God take over and let whatever happens happen. I've already said that's a challenge for me. 6, I sense that God is present with me. I imagine God being moved as well. I haven't gotten to that, but it's part of what he's suggesting. And then I thank at the end. My prayer life will go more smoothly if I have consistent time and place and rituals for starting and closing. I talked about that already. So, and it's highly recommended that I work with a mentor or spiritual director who has been praying this way for a while. Our whole thing of sponsorship is based on I need to be involved with somebody who I feel is not just talking this stuff theoretically, a person that lives it. And I will say to you in terms of prayer that an active, a real prayer life is becoming absolutely the most important foundation of anything. Okay, so then he gets to phase two, gather the data, and he talks about here you're just trying to get in your mind or available all the different data points involved in whatever you're trying to decide, whether you're, and this is the rules for discernment apply to everything from what clothing am I going to wear today to am I going to enter a religious order or change jobs or change locations, big things and small things. Um, and he does this one thing in gathered data about hasty decision makers and hesitant decision makers, and it's on page 164 of God's Voice Within. I just found it interesting. Hasty decision maker, the emotion is panic, where the hesitant decision maker, the emotion is fear. Hasty decision maker, nagging thought, act now or it'll be too late. Where the hesitant decision maker is hunker down, just lay low, and then talks about some parables from the Bible. In false consolation, the hasty decision maker experiences euphoria, and nagging thought is more is better, and the hesitant decision maker, the emotion is self-satisfaction. That's complacency. A nagging thought, good enough. This is good enough as it is. So that's the end of gather data. Then we get to the other two phases. I'm going to try to get through them today. Phase three, dreaming the dreams, tapping into the deep desires. This is where we're trying to get to primary purpose, and this is huge. I've said over and over that my sense of primary purpose, appropriate to whatever situation I'm in, makes all the difference between a good experience and a bad experience. When I go to a meeting and I understand the primary purpose of the meeting is to stay sober and help another alcoholic achieve sobriety, the primary purpose of a meeting is not to improve my relationship with God. And if I feel like, well, you're not improving your conscious contact, this is or I hear somebody acting out or wherever they're at, that's not the primary purpose. It's a pretty low bar. We're all helping each other stay sober and help another alcoholic achieve sobriety. But the primary purpose of my life, that's a whole different deal. And when I sense that, and I don't know that I'm taking on the Ignatius trust, love, serve, trust, love, serve. Um, that is my job, is trying to discern, God, what is your purpose for my life, and then trying to live according to that purpose. It just makes everything different. Excuse me, I'm just going to turn that off. Okay, so let's see. Tapping in primary purpose, we talked about that. This is where they bring up Magus for the what is more for God's glory, similar to our how can I best serve you. I've just put in here to read to you that this is from Rick Warren, day one, from Purpose Driven Life. Day one is called It All Starts with God. And he says, it is not about you. The purpose of your life is far greater than your own personal fulfillment, your peace of mind, or even your happiness. The purpose of your life is far greater than your family, your career, or even your wildest dreams and ambitions. If you want to know why you were placed on this planet, you must begin with God. You were born by God's purpose, for God's purpose. That's just a wonderful reminder for me. Okay, so this dreaming the dreams. This is where you're trying to let your mind go and let God direct your thinking, and especially divorce your thinking from self-pity, self-delusion, self-seeking, and see what shows up in terms of what you would do. You have life on life's terms is an important thing. It's we gotta be able to practically meet whatever it is, but your heart's desire. This is a wonderful thing to feel in touch with. Um, and so then the phase four, the last phase of this thing, is where we are well. As I allow myself to dream crazy dreams, I then begin to ponder those dreams as I daydream, or he uses the word pray dream, the possibilities of living out my great desires in each option. I try to note the difference in my heart, as Ignatius did, when comparing his dreams of chivalry with his dreams of a religious life. I ask myself, which of these dreams leave me dry and sad, despite my best efforts to create a dream of great possibility? Which dreams have I found pleasure that lingers even after the dreams end? So he's basically asking which dreams leave me in consolation and which dreams leave me in desolation. Then he defines, in this case, he's defining, this is page 172 of God's Voice Within. Dreams of consolation, I feel filled with holy and wholesome desires. I have a sense of God's closeness. I have faith and hope and love. I want to proclaim these to the world or to my mentors and companions, and I have a deep down peace and tranquility with a sense of rightness. Um, Dreams that leave me in desolation, I'm without faith, hope, and love, without a sense of God's closeness. I'm disquieted and agitated. I feel no passion or zeal. I don't have a bunch of enthusiasm. I have a sense of boredom and tepidity, no energy, feeling deflated, deep down anxiety and fear. And I want to keep this all in secret. I don't want to tell other people. That's one of the first markers of desolation. Okay, I'm going to stop. We have some open discussion. Uh, I just love this stuff. I've said so often, I love finding um, in other spiritual literature the stuff that really supports what we do in AA. I find the big book, no matter how often or long I read it, it just grows in depth and meaning, and I'm real glad for that. So we're going to stop the recording and have some open discussion. Thank you for your attention.